Today we're going to start the session with a conversation with Roberto Milk, CEO and co-founder of NOVICA. Roberto was on the Entrepreneur Journey series recently, and I had a wonderful conversation and really found his journey extremely inspiring. So I invited Roberto to participate in this roundtable to build on that discussion. Roberto, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
So Roberto, let's get you introduced to our audience. Tell us a bit about yourself as well as what you're doing with NOVICA.
Well, NOVICA is a platform for artists around the world. And my grandmother on my Peruvian side was one of our very first artisans. And the whole system was born from this need to find a better way for artisans to reach the world market. And it's a need that I saw with my family traveling when I was a kid. My brother and I would explore markets as we went to countries, especially my parents. We were growing up in the States. My parents were living in San Antonio, Texas. And my mom, being Peruvian, she every summer came around. They were both teachers. She said, "I got to get back to Peru and see my people." So we would go to Peru and we would go other places, and these early childhood discoveries, in so many ways, influenced the company that we're running now.
My husband and I are avid travelers, and one of the things we really love is markets and artisans. So when we are traveling, we always seek out, where we can look at works by artisans and where are the markets and so on. So when you shared your story with me recently, I found it so inspiring and also so fun. And I've always wondered how these people would go to market and find their audience and so forth. And one of the stories that I remember very well is we were in a small town in India called Shantiniketan, which is a very artistic place. It was, I don't know if you are familiar with this place. It's where Rabindranath Tagore had his university, and there are tons of artists and artisans there. And we were invited to a home, and there were all these women who are trying to make a living with embroidery. And the embroidery is beautiful, but it's very overworked. So they're putting in so much work on one piece. And we were looking at that and we were saying, you can do 1/10 of the work and you'll find a bigger market, just because people don't want that complicated stuff. They just want simpler things. And of course, they're so far removed from the market that it's very difficult for them to grasp these nuances of minimalism and the trends of the modern market. So anyway,
that's so funny. You sound like one of our product sourcing people right now. Hearing you speak, you could, your input would be very valuable.
Well, I also ran a fashion company. It's one of the first internet fashion companies.
No wonder.
I have a lot of experience with. So tell us a bit about the artisans. Let's start the discussion with artisans. And what I would like to focus on, as you know, our mission is 1 million by 1 million. So in a marketplace like yours, obviously you have had tremendous impact on the lives of very small entrepreneurs. So tell us about a few of those that have been particularly successful, who they are, where are they from, and what is special about the ones that are really, making a big success on your platform.
Okay, great. Yeah, just listening to your story about the market in India really reminds me of really kind of how blessed we are in a way that one of my childhood passions, which was to go to the markets, right? This has become one where, rather than when we were kids, we were looking for just a cool product. We're just like, oh, we need something cool for our room, something unique, that none of our friends have. But then as an adult, when I travel, we get to do that. My wife and I, my wife's a co-founder. My brother, who I spoke about, he's a co-founder. There's a whole group of friends and family that have been running this for so many years. But our objective is to discover the artist. right?
Yeah.
And so you're going into a market, and the end objective is, how do I find which artists am I going to find today? And when we find them, we always, it's life changing for the artist, and that's so much fun. And one of the artists that I'll mention is an artist that we actually found in the markets in Peru, but we never easily find them because the markets are it's always middlemen, right? So it's rarely you're going to find the artist himself in a market. So it's always, there's a few middlemen you got to get through. But we were looking for these wood carvings called ekekos. They're good luck carvings. And we saw this incredible ekeko, and we're like, we got to find this artist. And it was in the corner of a shop in a market in Lima. And it took us out to the outskirts of Lima. One thing led to another, and we had to buy a bunch of them from that middleman in order to figure out for them to give us any information. And they only gave us a neighborhood, and then going to the neighborhood, and we're knocking on doors and saying, do you know who made this? And but that artist is Johnny Jimenez, and he's one of our more successful wood carvers, and his technique is just amazing. He does, and so the ekekos we found him with these ekekos, so it's kind of a niche, like who would know about an ekeko, right? It's the reason we were even looking for it is because there was a chef in a restaurant in Peru, in LA, this Peruvian chef, his name's Ricardo Zarate, who is this up and coming, Michelin possible, chef. And he's like, my secret is this ekeko, and he's got these. So we were looking for ekekos for him. But what ended up working was the Peruvian paso horses that Johnny Jimenez makes. They're lifelike and amazing. And the price points are not, you would think you'd be paying like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for these sculptural works of art, and they're not. And so he sold a lot of them, and it's really, and I think that when you have, like with Johnny, when we found him, he was so touched when we were saying, hey Johnny, you're going to have your own, you're going to be able to put your price, it's a market, we're a platform marketplace, right? So so the artists drive it. And so just like you were talking about in the market in India, where the ladies, if they put less embroidery, they might sell more and do less work, so that happens naturally through the system because the artists for the first time in their lives are getting product rating reports. So if we were to tell them, hey, that's a thesis that we would have. Oh, put less design and embroidery, maybe put it in the corners, and then we let the customers decide. So they might have, and they'll see ratings, and they'll say, okay, these are A rated, these are F rated. So let me do more of the A's, and they get the market feedback to be able to innovate.
Yeah. So what kind of numbers does a successful artisan do on NOVICA?
Well, it depends on, so some of the artists are individual artists, many of them, over half. They're, when we find Johnny Jimenez, it's Johnny Jimenez carving his paso horses, right? So it's an individual. And some of them, like Buana or Nero Goel, Buana is this amazing jewelry maker in Bali, and Nero Goel in India. She's one of our leading artists. They have been able to build up basically small businesses, so they hired people, and they have grown, and they have workshops, or they have this cottage industry where there's home production, but it's kind of coming through them. And so they've been able to grow. So for the individual artists, for them, a lot of times success is, $30,000-$50,000 a year. That's really big time success.
Big numbers.
We're talking about a lot of artists, individual artists that are going from $500 to $1,000 a month to triple, quadruple, 10 times that sometimes. And then for some of the workshops, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, those are very important numbers because the segment you're working with, they almost make nothing, and they were operating on very thin margins. So the kind of numbers you're talking about, especially in the geographies that you're talking about, those are very consequential numbers. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. And then when you couple in the microcredit, we give them access to 0% interest microcredit and all the other elements, the capacity building. It's really, it's great. when I've had like Johnny Jimenez, seeing him, and he wept when he came, you know. So it's like, okay, we're doing something right. If we're changing lives to the extent that people are so emotional about it, you know, that they're and so grateful, you know, that they're moved to tears. Something's going on that's pretty special. Yeah.
Roberto, talk a little bit about the microfinance, the Kiva partnership, and so on, in the context of how you facilitate the financing for these artists.
Great, yeah. So in many of our countries, access to credit is a big issue, and now more and more people are getting more access to credit, which is great. But in our sector, which is a big sector, like in a lot of our village economies, the number one industry is agriculture, and the number two industry is handicrafts. So handicrafts is a big driver in a lot of our village economies, right? But with handicrafts, very rarely, it's kind of like you're saying, it's very disparate. There's a lot of intermediaries. There's no access to the market or to the demand side to be able to innovate or you know, and then access to credit is usually non-existent. And so with us, one of the coolest things in our system is that artists, when they start up with us or when they grow with us, they get access to more and more credit collateralized by their own handicrafts. So never has that, like an artist who, and we sometimes have stories like there's an artist who does tapestries in the highlands of Peru, and his name's Faustino Maldonado, and he had an issue where he needed to access credit almost like as an emergency. And so he sent his extra tapestries down to our office in Lima and was immediately able to collateralize that and get 0% interest financing out. So they're like, oh my God, my products are assets now that I can borrow money on. And that's all thanks to Kiva and our customers. We have an artisan lending area of the website, and also with this amazing partnership with Kiva, it's a pass-through because the Kiva lenders are 0% interest lenders, and we pass that all the way through to the artisans, so they're borrowing at 0%.
And do the people on Kiva who lend in this mode, are they also buying the products from these artisans?
Absolutely. So there's a Kiva store that we run for them, and that store it's amazing. It's only Kiva borrowers. So it's Kiva borrowers that then are looking to provide their products to the same people that have lent them money. Then they can buy directly from the products. And if you think about it, like me like I love Kiva. I've been involved with Kiva since the very beginning when they were first launching. I was a lender, and I love the concept. I love empowering people, like the whole P2P model. I just love it. And so one of the things that I felt as a lender, I would lend, and then I'm like, well, how can I help this person? Because as an entrepreneur, I know part of it is access to capital, but part of it is growing a business, right? We know that as entrepreneurs, right? And so access to capital is important, but it doesn't drive, you know, the fact is you got to build a business, right? And so I was always like, how can I help? I was lending to a storekeeper in Nicaragua, and I'd feel like, how can I help them? You know, I'm lending money, but how can I then help them grow their business? What can I do to help them? And so with the Kiva store, people can go in and they can lend money, but then they can then further help. They can buy gifts from these artists, and that's a real great partnership. And we're thankful for Kiva and for the Kiva lenders and that whole community. And there's thousands of artists on the NOVICA platform, and probably over half have borrowed through Kiva.
Okay. And if you were to isolate the ones that you were giving examples of individual artists versus ones who have been able to scale a little bit to $30,000, $50,000, what percentage of the NOVICA artisans are actually building businesses on your platform?
Maybe half, and when you know, because many artists, their very first hire ever was through their sales with us. So I consider that building. I think once you start employing others, then you're no longer in it for yourself. You're building a business, right? So you're bringing on others, and then probably there's about a quarter that I would consider growing workshops. That they're working and they're now they have the hopes and dreams to grow bigger and bigger, and many of them have.
And in absolute terms, what are the numbers? How many artisans are on the platform, and so half of that is how many?
Okay, so we have about 4,000 artisan groups, which represent about 20,000 artisans. And so, but those 4,000 artisan groups, so about half of them would be individuals, straight individuals. Like that's they're painters, they're carvers, they're jewelry makers, and they make the items themselves by themselves, typically at home. And side note on that, during COVID times, they've been very grateful that they're able to produce at home, and there's a no contact delivery at the office, and the sales have been strong from people buying online, and so the artists are very grateful about that. And then there's the other artisans that are more, let's call them growing small businesses, right? So they started as themselves, and they've been able to hire people, and they're growing, and that's another really interesting segment that requires a lot of capacity building. So they're taking on credit for capacity building, for buying buying a machine to help with certain things, and that kind of stuff, hiring their first people, capital for raw materials to produce more.
And I think this is not an English-speaking audience at all, right? These are vernacular audiences. So your staff on the ground is all vernacular savvy staff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Very few of even in some of the English-speaking regions, like Ghana and India, and so it's most of our artisans in India, for example, they speak the many languages of India, right? So like some of them speak Hindi or Bengali, but usually English might be second language, and in Ghana they might speak Ga or Tree or like one of the tribal dialects, and then also English, possibly, but so it's mostly a non-English group.
And how does the geographical distribution play out? So is it Latin America number one, and how do you break down the 4,000 into geography?
The artists like to joke about this as NOVICA being the World Cup of arts and crafts. So just thinking about it in football, soccer terms. But like each country, has their own strengths and their own weaknesses, and they are, whether it's textiles or carvings or jewelry or, games, and so, and there are definitely areas of the world with very rich artisan traditions. Indonesia, Bali especially. Bali is known as the island of artists because there's so many artists per capita in the island of Bali. It's a small island with a lot of artists. India is extremely. It is amazing. Small countries like Guatemala in Central America, Guatemala is the hotbed of artisans. They're extremely talented artisans, and when you speak with them, it dates back to the Mayan times, and these are long-standing traditions. Peru is also very rich in the artisan sector, but every country, they all have, and so the artisans band together, and they're like, okay, we're gonna do make Peru proud, or make Mexico proud, or Thailand, so everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, but they definitely compete like in a friendly competition, kind of like the World Cup.
So Roberto, you've talked about the artisans and their businesses. Let's talk a little bit about your business. You've built a $20 million annual revenue company in 20 years. Talk a little bit about the highlights of your journey, and your impact has been vast. So share some metrics of, how you quantify that impact.
Sure, absolutely. So it's been I would say a very slow and steady build. And as an entrepreneur, especially as a social entrepreneur,
this is something I want to make absolutely clear to the audience listening. We are big believers in, we don't subscribe to that everybody will have to go from $0 to $100 million in 5 to 7 years and build a venture-funded company. This is not at all the philosophy of 1 million by 1 million.
Oh, good. Then I think I'm talking to the right crowd.
Yes, you are.
I can tell you our original business plan was to get to 100 million in 10 years, and so we still have that aspiration, and we'll do about 40 million this year. So, so we're growing. We hit the 20 million annual benchmark a few years ago, and then last year we were mid 30 million range, and so but it's slow and steady growth. And our sector has always been a challenging sector, the artisan sector, because it's not the first thing people think about when they're going to purchase something online. So there's a lot of business development involved with that. But yeah, the philosophy has been just build it every year, and every single year we've grown. And one thing that's been a driver is tracking the amount of money deposited to artists, the amount of money that artists actually receive, right? And that number, we hit 100 million this year to artists. And we're seeing that it just felt like a blink ago that we were at 75 million to artists. And we celebrated that. And then this year we celebrated 100 million. And so it's like we really want to build that to 1 billion. And I never would have imagined starting this 20 years ago with our whole group, with my brother, my mother-in-law, all my friends. And like we would have never imagined that we would be doing it this long. But also, I don't think we would have imagined that it would have been this impactful. Like and that's what keeps us going, is that, it's so impactful. And there's so many lives that have changed, because when it's one artisan whose life has changed in a village in Ghana, there are so many people around that artist that benefit from that. Not just the family, the whole community benefits. And so like the impact is really amazing. And now that we've partnered with UNICEF and all these other great organizations, the impact is multiplied that way. But yeah, no, it's the slow and steady, and thinking about, cash flow. And we've had years where we've made money, but mostly we've had to figure out ways to fund the deficit, which is always hard, We've got lenders and investors, and we had to capitalize in a major way with investors to build this infrastructure. So there's a lot of interesting elements to it. And we do one day, we have our sights on 1 billion to artisans, and we want to get to the 100 million a year mark. We're accelerating right now. We want to get there rapidly.
So talk a little bit about how you finance the company. You started with regular venture capital, and so talk a bit about how much money you've raised and how did you raise that money?
Well, with kind of traditional venture capital, just because of the way their funds are structured and the way that they it's kind of the Silicon Valley philosophy, which I highly respect, highly respect. Part of it is you have to fail fast, right? You really do. Like they push to get to get that MVP out and get to grow to scale and test it out and see if it works. And if it works, then you amplify that whole mindset. I love it. And we do that on a micro basis every day with new projects, right? We take that philosophy and apply it to new projects, like our subscription box and things like that. So, but really the horizon for traditional VCs, it can't be 20 years, right? The funds can't be structured that way.
7 to 10 years, so you have to kind of scale within that time frame.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very lucky that we've been able to bring on investors that are, first of all, patient, and they appreciate that we're building a real business. Another thing that helped in a way, just in terms of dynamics, is that when a lot of our investors came in, our original investors, They came in during the dot-com boom and right after that of the 1999, 2000s, right? And so, they most of their portfolios actually didn't survive. So in many ways, they were like, okay, well, NOVICA is a surviving portfolio company, and it went beyond our fund horizon, but we do see like a future liquidity event, where they can do well. So we hope that all of our original investors get a 10x plus on their invested capital. So I'll put that aside for now, and then talk about all of the social impact investors. I think that those investors, like, it's really important when you're thinking about your capital base to think about who's aligned. And if you're a mission-based company, especially like us, it's great to find mission-aligned investors, because then mission-based companies sometimes can be hard to scale, right? Hopefully not. I mean, I love it when you find a mission-based company that scales fast. That's awesome. That's the best. That's the best of all worlds. We're scaling, but we're just not scaling with the acceleration that we'd like to. Although we're getting some acceleration now as we're getting to scale. Marketplaces are funny that way. You grow and you grow and you grow, and then suddenly this magic starts happening in the marketplace, where you start to get some critical mass, and it's just taken us a while to get there, but we're getting that. But getting aligned with the investors, and we've had amazing investors like the Grassroots Business Fund. They're an offshoot of the World Bank. National Geographic Ventures, awesome investor group. We came in early, and not really an investor group, they were in a close business partner of ours that also invested and lent us money in the early years, and that was phenomenal for growing the company. Is that partnership with National Geographic?
And what do you see as the exit path for a company like yours? You will get to 40 million in revenue. Presumably, you will get to 100 million in revenue over the next few years if you keep at it. What kind of exit path are you seeing for this?
Well, in terms of where we'd like to go, we think about it more as we boil it down to one basic thing: how do we get more funds to artists, right? I love that. We're so lucky that as a company, some companies, like, they have a mission, but the mission is not part of the core business, right? For us, it's the core business. It is the business. How do we best serve artists? So whatever we can do to best serve what things can we do to serve artists as our clients, right? The artist, right? And so when we best serve artists, we best serve customers. But what can we do to best serve artists? And in that, how can we increase the future value for artists? How does this become how are we touching the hundreds of millions of artists around the world, that we're not touching right now? How do we get to them, and how do we transform the entire industry? So that's one thing that we think about. And so we think, so how does the company grow in that path? And one of the things we're doing is there's a lot of partnerships. A lot of kind of key partnerships, especially with nonprofits. So we're doing a lot of that right now. And in terms of an exit, I wouldn't say that it would be more like a future liquidity event, and that would be something that doesn't. The strategy is to build it as big as we can, and then the liquidity event will come.
Right. No, I was talking more about the liquidity event for your investors. You have to as long as you take venture money, you have to give an exit to those investors. So that's what I was questioning. I presume that you want to keep building the company itself and the business itself, but how do you give liquidity? I mean, I'm not sure if the public market is the right place for a venture like this.
Yeah.
It may be.
Yeah. Well, it might be down the road, and everybody's talking about SPACs these days. but yeah, no, for us, it's really building, that conversation. Luckily, we have a group of backers where primary goal is let's get to 100 million in sales and really grow it for artisans. And secondarily, then we'll find a great liquidity opportunity for some of those investors.
Is there a class of social impact investors who are willing to buy out your regular venture investors and stay in with you for a longer term?
Yeah, there might be. So that might be a possible future liquidity event where there's a private equity fund that's socially driven,
right.
that's mission aligned with us. Yeah, and that could be an opportunity, you know.
That's something that's becoming a bit of a trend that you may want to note in the industry, in that, you know, we, because of our work, we have been involved in early stage venture capital and early stage startups right, you know, through our journey, which has been more than 10 years now. So there is first it started kind of like as a side thing, but now it's becoming a strategy for a lot of micro VC funds that come in early, especially in countries and ecosystems where it takes longer to build companies. They do maybe the first 3 years of the journey or first 5 years of the journey and then exit into a Series B or Series C funding once the company has started hitting a faster growth stride. So you may have investors who have been in it for longer than they want to be in, but there are later stage ventures, later stage investors, private equity investors, or late stage venture capital investors who buy out these early investors, angels or VCs, micro VCs. And that's becoming a perfectly acceptable path of how to finance a company and how to run funds, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely an opportunity. I think some of our earlier stage investors, they see the big possibility here. They see the possible like disruption of the entire industry model, where currently there's so many middlemen. And it's just taken us a while to get that network effect going. But
right.
You know, even during COVID times right now, the sales have increased because people are traveling less. And I think with us, when they shop with us, it's just this virtual travel experience. So people are, customers are really happy to travel virtually and explore the markets, the bazaars and the markets of our site and enter and just enjoy receiving a package, because we ship from around the world. So they get the package with the postcard signed, and our offices take care of all the quality control and all that. And so they definitely, I think that's definitely a thing right now. And one of the most important things right now for us is that because the artists, our artists, they survive on tourism and travel in many ways. And so right now there's very little travel, almost no tourism happening in the countries where we operate. Open markets, many of them are closed right now. So their secondary markets or domestic markets are closed. It's really, really hard. And so we're getting artists that are basically grateful that the sales, they can't believe it. They're like, we would have never imagined. We're so grateful that we have this opportunity. They produce at their houses. They deliver no contact in our office. The products are quarantined for 48 hours in the regional warehouses, and so they're safely producing, and it's a lifeline. Where in some of our countries, it's really dire. Like in Guatemala, for example, there's when someone has run out of food, they put a white flag outside their house. So there's all these white flag homes that are popping up, and that means that it's basically a plea for help from anyone. And so our artists, they're telling us stories of how, because they have sales happening, and they're so grateful to the customers on NOVICA. They're buying from them, they're selling, and then they're like, if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be able to put food on the table, because we have you're the only thing we've got. We have no other, there's no local sales happening at all for their goods. And they're sending us messages saying how they're helping the block, like we're helping the village, or we're helping our entire block, because we have white flag homes. And so when we're buying basic staples like rice and beans and tortillas and stuff like that, we're spreading that around the block to all the white flag homes. So it is really, we're like in major impact territory right now with during COVID times that we never thought we'd be in.
It's wonderful. I love your story. So I'm so glad that we were able to